With the NFL season coming to an end and the 2026 NFL Draft on the horizon, it's the perfect time to do a redraft of the 2025 NFL Draft. All of the information is available to us, so let's go back to last season and go through the first round picks 1 through 32 as if we're the GMs of each of these teams and make the selections with what we know now that might have put these teams in a better spot going forward. As we know, the Titans started off the draft with pick number 1. They selected Cam Ward. Now, with it turning out to be a disaster this season, wound up firing Brian Callahan, their head coach. Robert Saleh is the guy now. I believe that Jaxson Dart would have been the right selection. He was a really talented player at Ole Miss this season. He threw 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, really mobile, 487 rushing yards, and 9 touchdowns to go along with that. He can't keep risking his body. He had some injuries, a couple of concussions this season, but he still had 2,272 passing yards, a completion percentage right around 64%. He did a pretty good job with the New York Giants. Now, John Harbaugh wound up in New York. That likely might not have happened if they did not have Jaxson Dart available, but this selection looks like it would have been the right one at pick number 1. The versatility of him, he's a tough kid. Cam Ward's all talented. We're going to hear his name in just a second. The Browns with pick number 2. We're going to make you wait to hear Cam Ward's name in a second. Going into last year, the question was Shedeur Sanders. Should they go with Dylan Gabriel? I think if they got a dominant player, remember they took Mason Graham with their selection. What if they did not decide to trade down with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who traded up into pick number 2 to take Travis Hunter? If the Browns decided to pair Myles Garrett with a dominant edge force, how about James Pearce Jr. out of Tennessee? He was an incredible defender in the SEC. He had 10.5 sacks as a rookie, a phenomenal rookie season, a very impactful player in turning the Atlanta Falcons into one of the worst pass rushes in the league into one of the best this past season. Now, with the Jaguars not making the trade up, they would stay there at pick number 5. So we're going to wait a bit to hear who they pick. But for the meantime, let's go down to pick number 3 with the New York Giants. Now that there's no Jaxson Dart on the board and the team was wanting a quarterback, I believe that Cam Ward was a consensus potential top quarterback for a lot of teams in this one. They would wind up selecting Cam Ward instead of who they took at that spot, which was Abdul Carter. Didn't have a great season in New York, struggled a little bit with off-the-field stuff and maturity issues. Hopefully that works out for him. But in this spot, number 3 with Cam Ward, he had 15 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Look, a good pocket presence. He's got a decent enough ability to stand there in the pockets and move around to evade defenders. Really talented gunslinger type individual. You pair him with Cam Scatteraboo, who wound up being an excellent player, and then Malik Neighbors before he got hurt with that injury. The New York Giants could have had still a pretty good season. It just might look a little bit different. Who knows if Brian Daboll winds up getting fired. Pick number 4, the Patriots took Will Campbell. Got to be honest, with the way it went for New England, why would you change a single thing? Now, the Patriots gave up 47 sacks in the regular season this season. That's far too many. Drake May, he was incredible. An MVP candidate guy and led his team really deep into the postseason. As of the recording of this video, I haven't yet seen them in the AFC Championship game. They're about to play the Denver Broncos. But this Drake May ability to just march his team down the field efficiently despite all of the pressure throughout the season that is faced. Let's still go with Will Campbell. I think the long-term effect of him being on that blind side protecting Drake May is going to work out. After all, he's going to live and die to defend his quarterback. Will Campbell, a really good selection. Number 4, we're going to keep it the same. Pick number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So if they don't wind up going up to take Travis Hunter, how about we go with some of the information available to us about another really talented player, Nick Emmanwori, the hybrid do-it-all linebacker, cornerback, safety, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner hybrid guy, freak athlete coming out of college. And he had 81 total tackles, 2.5 sacks, an interception, all over the field. He was testing off the charts at the combine. And if the Jaguars put him into that secondary, there was a trade that they made, they sent Tyson Campbell to Cleveland, wound up with Newsome, but putting Nick Emanwari into what was a really good defense, I think that elevates them to a level where possibly they wind up beating the Buffalo Bills in that wild card matchup. This is a guy that is a plug-and-play piece. He's going to be an incredible player for the Seahawks for quite some time. Just imagine if Emanwari was in that back end in Jacksonville, Trayvon Walker, Armstead, Josh Hines-Allen, all in front of that, so he can be a piece cleaning up the run, getting after the quarterback, or roaming in the secondary. What a selection that he wound up being for Seattle. At pick number 6, so they took Ashton Jeanty with that selection. With what we know, Jeanty struggled with the Raiders, and I still think that they should have gone running back, and this one, though, would be a guy that's a bit more explosive, a home run hitter. Travion Henderson, he was a national champion with the Buckeyes. He was one of the best pass-blocking running backs that anyone had ever covered coming out of college. And in his rookie season, 911 yards, 9 touchdowns, and then he added 221 yards receiving, a touchdown added to that. And I mentioned the pass-blocking skills. This guy lays people out. He's going to continue to improve. The only question with him is how healthy is he? What's the longevity looking like? But with Ashton Jeanty and that offensive line that they had, you would have imagined that if they had someone that's got a little bit more of an ability to create by themselves, making a guy miss, than as opposed to Jeanty, who is more running through people. The next step at the NFL level, he wasn't breaking those tackles that he was in college. So Travion Henderson would wind up being that selection for the Raiders in the long term. At number 7, the New York Jets, they went with Armand Membu, a good selection, solidifying that right side. They went with Fashanu. Last year, they took him instead of Brock Bowers. So the offensive line worked out. But watching the Jets this season, Garrett Wilson's the number 1 guy. He got hurt. They had nothing else. They had nothing whatsoever. So we're going to go Tet McMillan with over 1,000 receiving yards. He had 7 touchdowns, played in all 17 games. You pair an excellent big-bodied, 6'5", 215-pound receiver opposite of the shifty Garrett Wilson, and you turn this into one of the best duos at wide receiver in the league. Now, would Justin Fields have struggled the way he did? It's possible. The Jets' direction of where they're going, likely it's going to be better off that it's not Justin Fields at the helm of this team, but this was a selection that was possible for them. They could have gone with that. They decided to go with Membu instead of McMillan, and you saw McMillan go all the way to the playoffs and play very well against the Rams in that wild card game as the Panthers went on to win the NFC South. At pick number 8, the Carolina Panthers, without Tet McMillan available to take, they select Colston Loveland, the tight end, national champion out of Michigan. This kid was really young, raw, but also refined, if that makes sense, because of a smooth nature to him. More of almost a wide receiver than a tight end. He's like a big wideout in a 6'5", 250-pound frame, but also he loves ball. He puts his nose in there, gets his hands in the dirt. He'll hit you in the face. Excellent run blocker, 713 yards, 6 touchdowns. But he had 193 yards in the playoffs. Only 116 yards in the first 6 games, but 6 touchdowns in the final 13 games overall. In the final 4, 28 catches, 378 yards, and 2 touchdowns. As the season got later and later, the weather turned. Caleb Williams on the Bears decided to go to Loveland. I think Bryce Young would have been going to Loveland. They had Sanders, but if they had Colston Loveland in that offense, he potentially could have had the same production that McMillan winds up having. It looks like Loveland's going to be an excellent player for a while. Also with McMillan, it does appear to have that too. Can't go wrong with either guy, but the Panthers at number 8 wind up selecting Loveland. At number 9, some of these picks, we're going to keep it the same based off the way some of these guys looked. I think Kelvin Banks was a good selection. Tyler Shuck's going to get another year at it. And this guy started all 17 games at left tackle, playing nearly every offensive snap. He got his ankle rolled up in week 18, but it wasn't a long-term injury. They tried to address this spot in the 2024 draft, taking Talise Fuaga. That didn't quite work, so they moved him to the right side, and Banks allowed him to be the mauler on the right side and him be the pass protector, protecting the blind side for their quarterbacks. They went with what looked to be Shuck, and then it was Rattler, then to Shuck, then back, and then so they had a little bit of a back and forth between them. It does look like Tyler Shuck will be the guy going forward, at least for next year. From November on, Kelvin Banks only allowed 2 sacks, so he developed well. He could potentially turn into that cornerstone piece, which I think he will be. Really highly touted, coming out of Texas. Still a good selection, I think, at pick number 9. Let's go on to pick number 10, the Bears. Carson Schwarzenegger screamed Chicago Bears going into this draft. You just thought, though, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, they sort of had it set going into this season, but with what we saw, TJ Edwards, he missed 4 games, and with the injury against the Packers going forward here, you don't know his health going into next season. And then Tremaine Edmonds, he goes on IR. He missed 7 games last year. What if you had Carson Schwarzenegger in the middle, a hybrid player? He doesn't miss tackles, 146 tackles, 11 tackles for loss. He can attack downhill. He also had 20 quarterback pressures, including 2.5 sacks. So you can send him on run blitzes. You can send him after the quarterback, which Dennis Allen used a lot later on in the season to try and make up for the injuries that he had to his linebacking core, as well as the secondary. So this guy coming out of the UCLA Bruins program reminded you a little bit of Anthony Barr, but less of like that pass rushing style, more of just a pure off-ball linebacker type player. Barr was that at UCLA, off-ball guy, but didn't quite fill into an all-pro level player that looks like Schwarzenegger has the potential to be. Barr's career was fine. I think Schwarzenegger's got a higher chance of being that impact player over the next decade. He's got a spot there in Cleveland, but he could have been a great player for a long time in Chicago. Actually, on the note of the Bears, Brian Urlacher, he was selected top 10 back in 2000, I want to say, and they had an injury. He stepped in. They never took him off the field. So if you had that Edmonds injury, I believe he got hurt week 2. You slide him right in there, and maybe that would have been a similar situation to what you saw in Chicago 25 years ago. Pick number 11, the 49ers. They take Abdul Carter. If he was in that spot in the draft, you would have had to take him. I talked about the struggles he had with maturation and turning into a player. He can still be a Pro Bowl, all-pro level player. He was incredible in college. Probably the best defensive player in 2024 in college football. With just one arm, he was dominant in the playoff against SMU, Boise State, and then against Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal. Tried to take over and dominate just by himself, and he was pretty much achieving that. 49ers took Michael Williams. He was an excellent edge defender out of Georgia, but Abdul Carter's ceiling does appear to be higher. He had 43 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumbles recovered. He's got the upside to be a premier defender in the league for a long time. It would have been interesting to see him in San Francisco with way it went with Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, those guys getting hurt if he had been with San Francisco. Pick number 12, the Dallas Cowboys, Ashton Jeanty. I think that this selection was talked about a lot. I was excited to see it. And with the way their offensive line played this year, imagine their number 9 run game with this beast. I mean, it wouldn't have been hard to imagine a bit of production from Jeanty that even surpassed the way that their run game was this season. I saw him with this year struggle behind that weak offensive line with the Raiders, and it was tough for all of us to see that. But 975 yards, 5 touchdowns rushing, and then 376 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns overall. He was excellent as a dual threat guy and showcased that ability that he did at Boise State. He actually could catch the ball well. It just gave him so many carries to try and get the rushing yards to potentially get him that Heisman Trophy. I think Ashton Jeanty would have been a good pick. Tyler Booker, maybe their offensive line isn't as good, but Ashton Jeanty to the Cowboys, it just screams Emmitt Smith 2.0. The Dolphins, instead of taking his teammate, they wound up taking Kenneth Grant. What if they took Mason Graham, who had a decent enough season, 49 total tackles, 7 stuffs, played in all 17 games. He's going to continue to develop. Graham and Grant both look like they're going to be good players for a while, but Graham possibly with a guy that's just going to produce from an earlier level. Grant's a bit more of the developmental prospect. You're sort of looking at the ceiling, whereas Graham, his floor is going to be a good interior defender for a while. So the Dolphins go with Mason Graham. The season caught on fire from the first 3 games for Miami, but still, even though they fired their coach, they could have had Mason Graham there at 13 if a lot of this went up happening in front of that. But number 14, some of these picks, we're going to keep the same. I don't know how you would go through that entire season and then do a redraft and not take Tyler Warren. Once again, 76 catches. He was a true Swiss Army knife on that offense. 817 yards, 474 of them were yards after the catch. He plays all over the field. 63 snaps in the backfield, 459 snaps inline tight end, 271 snaps in the slot, and then a 103, over 100 snaps lined up out wide. He can play anywhere on offense, even had 3 snaps at quarterback. You wound up having your QB, Daniel Jones, go down, but Tyler Warren, what a selection for the Indianapolis Colts. At pick number 15, the Atlanta Falcons in that pass rush, so they wound up taking Jalen Carter, and I thought that was a decent enough pick. He was really productive with the Georgia Bulldogs, but Kenneth Grant, we see another Michigan Wolverine. He had 2 sacks, 33 tackles for loss in 17 games, a really athletic run stuffer. The ability for him to just take guys on, take on those double teams, and if he's one-on-one, good luck trying to block this guy. He was incredible at Michigan. I think that he would have still produced with Atlanta. No James Pearce Jr. or Walker in this situation. Later on in the draft, I wind up not having the trade. I just wind up changing it a little bit, and you'll have to stay to the end of that. Pick 26 when they wound up trading with the Rams. I kept that one, just changed the Travis Hunter and the Browns trade a little bit based off just the way that it went. So let's go to pick number 16. Halfway through this one, the Cardinals. So this offensive line was awful. They gave up 59 sacks. I think that Armand Membu coming in there, he'd replace Jonah Williams at right tackle. This guy still got to become a bit more of a polished player. Very good in the run game. He held his own against Jalen Phillips and TJ Watt. All you want to see from a young offensive lineman in the AFC. Armand Membu could have helped the Cardinals out a little bit there and maybe even saved Jonathan Gannon or Kyler Murray's jobs. Number 17, so the Bengals, they lose Joe Burrow for a big part of the season. It was a dumpster fire after week 2. Burrow goes down. They gave up 36 sacks, which isn't awful, but the priorities to protect your quarterback, they took Shamar Stewart. There was no production there, basically. So if they could take Tyler Booker, imagine the way that the Cowboys' run game sprung to life. From the 27th overall run game in football in 2024 to 9th. This guy loves to take opponents' souls. Those are the words right out of his mouth. How about someone like that on the O-line protecting Joe Burrow? You also protect Joe Burrow by running the ball a little bit more, handing it off to your back, and Chase Brown at number 19. So the Buccaneers, they wound up taking Emeka Egbuka, but it looks like with this offense, they needed some more production on the ground. Bucky Irving was a 4th-round pick a season ago, but if you had a Marion Hampton running around, he did wind up getting hurt, but 545 yards, 5 touchdowns rushing. He also added production, 200 yards receiving, and a touchdown. That position this year was a huge, not an anchor in a good way, solidified, but bringing down the entire ship, not allowing it to move. If they had some really good running back production, Tampa might very well have won that division, and things just fell apart for them. They were 6-2 and wound up going 2-7 in their final 9. Emeka Egbuka sort of disappeared off the map. He struggled with a hamstring injury, and it just didn't go well from the middle part of the season. Number 20, the Denver Broncos. They were a wild card team coming off the loss to the Bills. How about Xavier Watts? Now, this was a 3rd-round pick, but he came off of 2 straight years of being an All-American player with Notre Dame, runner-up to being a national champion, right? They lost to the Buckeyes, but 5 interceptions, 92 total tackles, and 11 passes defended. He was incredible. One could argue that free safety is the weakest position on D for the Broncos. Now, Brandon Jones is a good player. He got hurt. He had 48 tackles and 7 passes defense. But if you brought in that kind of an impact from Xavier Watts for Denver instead of what they wound up doing with Jahdae Barron, I think that this defense would have been a hair even above what they were. They didn't take the ball away as much as you thought they would with that number of 68 sacks, the 5th most in NFL history. So Xavier Watts at pick number 20. Pick 21, no-brainer there. It would have been Emeka Egbuka, a great selection. They took Derek Harmon, and I liked his production back half of the season as he was healthy. But Egbuka in this offense, he would have thrived with Aaron Rodgers, a veteran player, and Aaron, a Super Bowl champion, a guy that had been to 5 championship games. He only had 261 yards in the final 8. Aaron always loved to sort of find his guy. With DK Metcalf at the end and struggling with the maturation, it feels as if Emeka Egbuka is a 33-year-old veteran like Devontae Adams. He had 677 yards and 6 touchdowns in the first 9 games. I believe if he's there in Pittsburgh, the season could have wound up a little bit differently for them. They still made the postseason, but they just had no other outside threats except for DK. Number 22, Los Angeles Chargers. Look, Hampton was great, but let's say that if they would have rather gone back and done it, I would say that Gray Zabel would have been an excellent selection for him right there. I got to go back here. I actually skipped over Seattle at pick number 18. So the Seahawks at pick number 18, they take Travis Hunter without Nick Immenwari available, which they took in the second round. They took Gray Zabel, but what if you add in potentially one of the freakiest type athletic guys in the history of college football, Heisman Trophy winner, serving as a role player on offense and then splitting time on defense, going both sides. Travis Hunter going both ways for one of the best defenses in football, an excellent front four. Immenwari, it worked out perfectly fine. Gray Zabel helping on the offense. What about a guy in Hunter that could have gone both ways? Who knows? Maybe they don't get Rashid Shaheed, who is a terrific player later on in the season, but hard to not potentially grab what is still potentially a generational player in Hunter. It just depends on whether he can put on some weight, some muscle mass, and adapt to the next level. Pick number 22, the Los Angeles Chargers. They go with Gray Zabel. He was PFF's highest graded player in Week 18. Of anyone, it was Gray Zabel with Seattle. So this guy helped cut down the Seahawks sacks from 54 to 27. A lot of it had to do with his help. The Chargers, Justin Herbert was sacked 54 times this season. The season before that, it was 41. If they had an interior offensive lineman to help them out. Look, Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, there's no way you would select someone there. But on the interior, they had a lot of struggles. He could have really helped this team that had potential if they could have just protected Herbert, which they could not do. Now, this one is where it gets fascinating. So the Green Bay Packers at pick number 20. I think you go Luther Burden. They wound up taking Matthew Golden, and he didn't have a touchdown the entire regular season. His first touchdown was in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes to go against Chicago. But Burden, 652 yards, 2 touchdowns. And you compare that to 361 for Golden, I think that Luther Burden is a budding star there. An absolute steal to get that guy at pick number 39. He's a willing blocker already. One of the best players in the league, catching the ball and running with it. Run after the catch is excellent. Burden could have had the Green Bay Packers offense humming from the get-go to an even better ceiling than what they were at when they lost Tucker Kraft. Imagine if they had a player that they could rely on in Burden there. So pick number 24, keeping it in the NFC North. Let's go Malachi Starks. If you need a successor to Harrison Smith, whenever that does happen, Starks is the perfect guy to do that. National champion, 49 tackles, 2 picks, 4 passes defended. This is a really rangy guy. He can come up into the box, hit, coached by one of the best to ever do it in Kirby Smart. And his impact on that defense, the chance to learn from Harrison Smith And I really believe that opportunity to play behind him and then eventually play with him this season, you could be having a perennial all-pro player if you wound up putting that in Minnesota. Pick number 25, the Houston Texans. So this would have been really interesting for Houston. I wound up going with a different type of a player here. So I wound up going with a little bit of the same thing that they did, right? I know that I changed a couple of things, but I like Jaden Higgins. I got to be honest with you. If Jaden Higgins wasn't on this offense, I have no idea where they would have been because they struggled. The fact of the matter is that they just had a need to push the ball down the field. And they had Nico Collins, but without Higgins, can't imagine that this offense would have been close to where they were at the end of the season, going on that hot stretch with Higgins being a very important impact player. I know that you could say running back here potentially, but if you already had Henderson off the board and Ashton Genty and Amarion Hampton, and you didn't have those kinds of selections, we're gonna go with that selection there. Jaden Higgins, they took him in the second round. Why not put him here? A lot of these picks, I do like what those guys did and they produced. Let's go with him at pick number 25. Physical, speed, he can win one-on-one. A season where it wound up for Houston, it really was more about running back, but there's no true value of a running back that I like. Hal Monangai was a really good player, a 7th rounder. I think the first round might be a little bit high for that. An excellent kid, physical, low pad level. Could go with Bill, Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, RJ Harvey, but let's stick with exactly what they wound up doing. Pick number 26, the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go Jahad Campbell. This guy is a pure football player. He was exactly that with Alabama. He had 80 tackles in his rookie season, a forced fumble, a pick, just a versatile chess piece. He can get after the quarterback, play off ball, whatever you want him to do in Philly, he's going to be doing it for a while. If Atlanta brought him in, didn't have James Pearce Jr. available, you could put Jalen Carter here. That's certainly possible. They did take him earlier, so I do think that Jalen Walker. You could go Jalen Walker and go pick 26. They're sort of interchangeable for me. Go Jalen Walker, what they did, and put that selection at this part of the draft, or Jahad Campbell. I'm going to make that interchangeable. Whatever you want to wind up deciding. Maybe Jalen Walker's more realistic because they put him in at pick number 15. But for the intents and purposes and what the production was this season, and Jalen Walker not being one of, I would say, the best 40 rookies this year, let's go with Jahad Campbell. Pick 27, Baltimore Ravens go Derek Harmon. I know he was with a rival, and we did that Burden instead of Golden thing, Bears-Packers. Let's go Baltimore and Pittsburgh, one of the best rivalries in sports. Harmon had 3 sacks, 27 total tackles, wasn't healthy from the early going, but he came on in the late month of November and December. He was an excellent player on the interior. He was great. Huge part of why Oregon had an excellent season, winning the Big Ten a year ago when they beat Penn State. So Harmon in the interior. Matabike went down. The Ravens defense it went down the dumpster. So if they had Derek Harmon, they might have been able to sustain a little bit. They just lost so many games, 1-5 from the get-go. They just couldn't get out of their own way with injuries for most of the season. But at the end, it ultimately came down to a tight game with the Pittsburgh Steelers that they wound up not being able to win. 28, the Lions, Tyleik Williams. I like that pick. He's an excellent selection. Played for the team down south for Ohio, and he wound up going up north to Michigan. But Tyleik Williams playing with his teammate and Aiden Hutchinson, former foes. He had a good enough season. This guy coming out of college, a run stuffer, got the potential to turn into a guy that can affect the passer more. He's an immovable object, very tough to defend him if you've got him singled up one-on-one. Quadin Muhammad came on a lot this year. Aiden Hutchinson was probably one of the best 15 players in the National Football League. So I like that selection for the Detroit Lions, the interior defender out of Ohio State. Number 29, the Commanders. They gave up 37 sacks. Offensive line could be there. They took Connerly. Let's go with Jacob Parrish, though. Really good job with the Bucks. 76 tackles, 7 passes defended, 2 picks, 2 sacks. This guy was their best defensive back this season, and if he was there in Washington, might have been able to help out. Trey Amos, that selection is looking okay. Gotta see more. Mikey Sanders still, though. He struggled a lot throughout the season. You put in and throw Jacob Pearce in there, I think the Washington Commanders secondary holds up a bit better. Pick 30. There's the Buffalo Bills taking Matthew Golden. I really believe that the utilization of him was just not correct. You got to get this guy the ball down the field. They used him only misdirection and sweeps, reverses, and quick throws, but Matthew Golden could win contested catches. He could separate from guys. With Josh Allen, I think that they open him up, getting him next to Keon Coleman and Shakir in that offense. I believe the Bills could have unlocked that, and that would have been something in the postseason against the Denver Broncos, that maybe they had a bit more of an explosive opportunity with Golden in the offense. All those turnovers from Josh Allen, and it's possible he does that again, but with Golden in the offense, I do think that it's more explosive what they produce. A great run game, one of the best in football with Golden on the perimeter, though, and his range. He was so good with the Texas Longhorns, a game-changing guy. Ball in his hands, he's one of the best in the league in the next few seasons. As long as you get him the football, that's just the main thing. Pick 31, the Chiefs, Quinshot Judkins. Running back was such an issue for them. The offensive line could not get healthy, but bring in a guy that can make people miss and run through your face. 827 yards, 7 touchdowns, added 170 plus reception yards in 14 games. The injury, that was really tough to see from Judkins, a national champion running back, set records with the Ole Miss Rebels. This is a guy that would have been a premier player for a while if he came to the Kansas City Chiefs. Instead, he's likely going to be that for the Browns. The last pick in the draft, we don't have that trade where the Eagles traded up with KC to take Campbell, which what they wound up doing. So instead of that, we've got the Chiefs taking a Quinshot Judkins, and the Eagles, they stay back and they take Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. 72 catches, 731 yards, 353 after the catch, 6 tubs. He would just inject life into that offense. They need production. Dallas Goedert's a good tight end, but how about a guy that's a bit more like a wide receiver? Get him the ball in space. That Eagles offense has been broken, and it was throughout the season, leading the league in 3 and outs. How about someone you can go to on third down? For whatever reason, they didn't try and add in a misdirection in the sense of pre-snap motion or anything like that, and creativity. It was a pretty stale offense. If you add in a weapon like Fannin, it could have looked a lot different. See, that is the redraft of 2025. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of it. Had a lot of fun making this one. I really do believe that it was a decent enough draft for a lot of teams, but half of these teams in this thing, I think, would have wound up making a couple of different selections. We roll through a couple of the backgrounds from the scenes of that draft. I think I like that image the most. Just beautiful Lambeau Field and the surrounding Green Bay and that in Titletown. But yeah, let me know down below what picks that I overlooked here, what selections that you actually liked, and where you would have changed something from here. I want to hear from you. If you're new here, please subscribe for more content in the future with Blitz a Blender. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. It just helps me continue to make these videos consistently. We're going to be coming out with a ton of NFL draft content as we get closer to the draft day. It's still a couple months away, but it gets closer and closer by every second. Need as much information as you can to stay up to date on this stuff. This is the perfect place for that. The intersection between the NFL and college. That's what's great about this show, because we cover both extensively 365 days a year. So you are in the right place for your draft coverage and the rest of football content. We got it 24/7, 365 here with Blitz the Blender. I appreciate you so much. Again, make sure to subscribe if you have not already. Let me know in the comments down below what types of videos you might want to see going forward here in the off season. So I appreciate you so much, and I will see you next time.